Stephanie, good to see you. First of all, I'm glad you're feeling better. We were supposed to do this last week, and
Yes,
I think timing is everything. And there's been a lot of things have occurred in the medical world in the last 24 hours.
that's true.
It's like you think that things are like calming down in certain areas, and they do for a little bit, and then all of a sudden things just change, and it spikes up again in terms of things to discuss. And yesterday, the new nominee for Surgeon General was Casey Means, and
Yes.
I've shared my thoughts on X. I was getting a little bit blasted for it yesterday of what I thought about it, and I base this on conversations I've had with people over the last year in the medical freedom movement, and I just have a lot of questions in regards to this, and it doesn't seem like I can ever get answers or any type of clarity on it. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on with that recent nomination.
Yeah, well, Casey and Callie Means are an interesting pair, brother and sister. Both have shown up on the scene among the movement, the food movement community, I would say. And they suddenly became very popular and very well known through some critical interviews that were done. And she's quite charismatic, I think, and she has an interesting past with her education at Stanford, medical degree, and all of that. And then she's just basically done an about face and decided that she doesn't like the mainstream medicine system, and she's become an outspoken against it. And certainly she's been pushing the concept of the idea of food as medicine, which I certainly agree with, that our food supply is our problem and we need to fix it in order to have a healthy America. And so I'm pleased with her nomination from that standpoint. There is some mystery surrounding her. Certainly I'm aware of some misgivings about exactly what she is and who she really is. It's a bit mysterious, but I don't yet have answers on that to say whether there should be concern.
Well, and my thought with it is, again, because I've had many medical freedom doctors on since COVID, and I never heard of those two. I mean, I feel like I'm someone that's plugged into all this, and they come out of nowhere.
Yeah, they
And
did come out of nowhere for sure, and all of a sudden they were very popular. And it does feel like somebody was promoting that concept. Somebody important was making that happen, but I don't know what was going on behind the scenes.
I mean, they hit Tucker, they hit Joe Rogan, and
Mm-hmm.
still to this day, not that I've heard on I mean, I've never heard on interviews them denounce the vaccines, the
Mm-hmm.
COVID vaccines,
Mm-hmm.
and or even the child vaccine schedule. And to me, it's concerning. And I mean, I watched the podcast that Danny Jones and Mary Bowden and Jack Cruz and Callie Means, her brother, was on, and she wasn't on it. But that to me like raised more concerns. So I'll have to send it to you, and then maybe you could
Yeah, I
share
haven't
with me
seen
what you
that
think.
video. It sounds interesting. Certainly something fishy going on, perhaps. It looks that way. Could be. Hopefully we'll get some answers at some point.
Well, and the other side of it, though, I'm not. I'm 100% the food supply and what's in it, or I don't even know what's in it. I have a thing now where when I look at a box of something, you've helped me with a lot of this, but in our conversations. But when I look at something, if I don't know what that means, that's something I probably don't want to eat. Like an
The
emulsifier,
ingredients, if it's got a whole bunch of chemicals in the ingredients, you got to watch out.
that's probably not
Mhm.
something I want to eat, right, Stephanie?
Right. I know. Yeah. If you look at a soy protein bar, it's just amazing. I wonder how anybody would ever think that was a good thing to eat.
I didn't realize that they put seed oils in seasonings.
Hmm.
They go that far deep with all this. What do you need to put those for in spices and
I
seasonings?
know. I don't know. It's maybe you want an oil base, I suppose, for the seasonings. And seed oils are probably cheaper than other oils. I think that maybe cost may be the main factor.
It's amazing to me that we've gotten to a point where I mean it's everywhere. And I remember, I'll be 47 here at the end of the month, and I mean even 20 years ago watching something where they said stay away from the middle of the store. Always shop on the
Oh,
outside of
yes,
it. It's so true now.
definitely.
And glyphosate, I didn't, again, talking to you, I never realized like glyphosate and how much of an impact that has on our food supply.
Really, really important. I think it's the most important toxic chemical in our food today.
Tell
Most
pe-
significant.
tell people, what type of foods you're going to find that in.
Yeah, well, of course, there's the GMO food. So that's the corn, soy, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa. Those are the core GMO crops. Cotton as well. So cottonseed oil, for example. And then, but then the other thing that's worrisome is that non-GMO, a lot of non-GMO foods also have lots of glyphosate, sometimes more glyphosate than the GMO foods. And for example, wheat and barley, chickpeas and garbanzo beans, oats, these things are all sprayed routinely right before harvest. Glyphosate is sprayed on them as a desiccant to sort of accelerate the rate at which it goes to seed, increase the yield, get a head start on next year's weeds. There's sort of like a lot of good drying it out, basically, a lot of good reasons to do that. And as long as you think glyphosate's not toxic, you don't worry about the fact that you're spraying it and it's going into the food supply. Because it's so close to harvest, you get higher levels. Sugarcane is another one that gets sprayed right before harvest. So all of those foods that are derived from those are going to have high levels of glyphosate in them.
So you mentioned wheat, barley, and I think to myself, even though I'm trying to stay away from it, bread.
Bread, I know, yes, definitely.
Sourdoughs, right? I mean, there's wheat in
Yeah,
all that.
sourdough is probably the best bread you can buy, and I think it may be the case that those microbes that make the sourdough might be able to metabolize glyphosate, which would be awesome if it's true. I don't know if it's true, but it might be the case that you could reduce the glyphosate levels by virtue of the fermentation process.
What about localized sourdough when you go to like a bakery that's in the neighborhood? Would that have an impact?
Well, it depends on where that bread came from. I only eat sourdough bread, but always buy organic, certified organic sourdough, which is delicious. That's my favorite bread by far, both in terms of taste, but also because I think it's good for you. I think that's the best bread.
From a store bought, or do you go to a local
We
place?
have a bakery here in Kauai that's organic bakery that makes delicious sourdough bread. So we're very fortunate.
Well, and the other thing too is with both wheat and barley. I mean, those are key ingredients in beer.
I know, that's right. And beers test positive for glyphosate. The Germans did a study on a whole bunch of beers, and all of them were contaminated.
There was not one exception out there that you found.
No, and Zen Hanukkah tested wines. That's another one. Grapes, you don't think of grapes because why would they put glyphosate on grapes? But apparently they control the weeds growing around the grapevines with glyphosate, and that ends up in the wine. So beer and wine are both contaminated.
Not even Guinness, Stephanie. We can't even get an exemption with Guinness.
I wonder about the hard liquors. I always avoided hard liquor. I always thought beer and wine were healthier than hard liquor, but now I'm not so sure because I'm thinking maybe the hard liquors don't have as much glyphosate, but I don't know that for a fact. I just haven't seen anybody say that they do.
I don't. I think of hard liquor. I think of tequila, but I don't know there's any barley or wheat in tequila. What other?
No, yeah, I would think tequila might be safe from the standpoint of glyphosate, but I don't know. Someone should be measuring and finding out. I'd be curious to see how that stacks up against the beer and wine, in terms of the glyphosate levels.
When was glyphosate? When did it become a thing where it started being utilized more? How far back does this go?
It started in 74 was when it was first introduced on the market, got approval from the FDA, the EPA, I guess, and it has been approved ever since. So they don't even really try very hard to decide whether it's still safe or not. They just kind of let it keep on going. They decided way back when that it's safe, and then it just stays that way as far as the regulatory process is concerned. But it really started ramping up around 2000 when they introduced the GMO Roundup Ready crops. They didn't come into being until late 1990s. and then the growth of glyphosate usage went up exponentially over that first decade of this century, along with the exponential rise in a whole bunch of other diseases like autism and obesity and diabetes and Alzheimer's. All these diseases started going up dramatically as well as the use of glyphosate went up. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's a direct causal effect.
So the EPA passes it into law in 74.
Yeah, they said this is great stuff. It's completely safe for humans. It's like aspirin. It's like there's no problem with it. It's awesome. And then it kills all plants except for the GMO plants, which if it kills all plants, you can't think it's an easy thing. It's got to be pretty toxic if it kills all plants, because many of the herbicides only kill certain types of plants. They don't kill everything.
So, but when they did that in '74, the intention was they were going to use that to kill off weeds.
Weeds, for weed killer. That was the intent. Yes. And then once they discovered they could engineer these plants to have resistance, because there was a critical enzyme, EPSP synthase, in the shikimate biological pathway in the plants that glyphosate really hits hard on. And that enzyme is so critical that it kills the plant when that enzyme is dead. And so they were able to find a microbe that had a version of that enzyme that was insensitive to glyphosate. So they gave that enzyme to the plants, and that's how the GMO works. They've inserted a microbial enzyme into the plant's genome. Kind of amazing technology, I have to say, but very worrisome.
And when did that technology evolve? In the early 2000s, you said?
Yeah, late 1990s is when it first started appearing, I think, becoming useful. And then they ramped it up very quickly once they had it. They started marketing these GMO seeds for corn and soy in particular.
So there was a 25-year span from the initial inception of it, legalizing it. So
right, 25 years.
Yeah. So once they passed it legally, then they were like, okay, it's done, it's safe.
Yeah,
we don't need to revisit.
They never really tried very hard, and then the industry would bug them and say, you know what, we're finding levels above the limit in this particular food, like let's say soy. Products are testing higher than the limit. You need to raise the limit. The industry would tell the regulators, you need to raise the limit that you allow in this product because it's going above it. They would say, oh, okay, fine, we'll just multiply it by a factor of 20. I mean, they had no interest in determining whether it was still okay. Their idea of what is the upper limit of what's safe is based on what the industry tells them is in the food. Just make sure that all the food is safe by virtue of making the limit high enough is how they work it, so that nothing violates the limit.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and bam, I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. I can also take delivery at any time, extremely simple and less expensive than any other method. The do-it-yourself way to buy precious metals. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. I mean, look at how easy this is. The Vaulted app on my phone, I can access it at any time. And then once they were able to modify it, so it took them 25 years or so for them to get to a point where they could modify the GMO food. And correct me if I'm saying this wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Introduce those GMOs into those crops, yes.
So they were working, where were they doing the R&D for this to be able to further move it along?
Oh, I don't know. Various companies. Actually, I should know which one developed that GMO, I think it might have been Monsanto, actually. I should know that. Dow Chemical is another one that's been involved in that sort of thing. I mean, there are these companies that are in the business of trying to find ways to improve the crop so that it can resist the toxic exposure, so that they can then use the herbicide freely. They've developed GMOs that are resistant to other herbicides lately as well. They've come up with GMO resistance, I think, to 2,4-D and dicamba. I know they have a product now that is dicamba plus glyphosate. Those are both herbicides. And they've introduced that. I think on the soy, they have a GMO soy that you can buy that has resistance to both of those. And then you buy this product that has both of those in it, because there are weeds that are resistant to glyphosate, but the dicamba will take care of those weeds. So they're doing this kind of combo, just add more a variety of different herbicides into one package so that you can handle the different weeds that are resistant to one or the other. It's an escalating path that is going to not end well, because we get more and more exposure to these chemicals. And of course, now if they start introducing, they actually were able to cut back on some of the other herbicides once they had these GMO crops, because they could focus on glyphosate, which they considered to be really safe compared to the others. It turns out that's not true. In fact, there was a study, it might have been Seralini's team that did a study where they were going to use glyphosate as the standard, as the safe chemical to compare with the other ones as a reference, and they were comparing them for toxicity. And it turned out glyphosate was more toxic than all the other ones. They were quite surprised. The Roundup formulation. And of course, the formulations have other things in them that are also toxic, and those are acutely toxic. They're never studied. And when they study glyphosate, they study it in isolation. And then when they use it, they put in this other stuff into the formulation that makes the glyphosate more toxic, but also those things are toxic in and of themselves. But they never evaluate the formulation.
I just think, it's like once you cross that threshold of, making it legal in the mid 70s, and then they were just further pushing it. And the intention was for weed killing. And you see it, how it evolves. All of a sudden it's spraying barley and wheat, and it is completely infected the food supply.
It is. I mean, that's the thing that has become apparent from people like Zen Honeycutt. Zen Honeycutt's a good friend of mine. She's the founder of Moms Across America, an organization where she gets the moms involved, and the moms help her out, actually. So she's had her moms go get samples from school lunches from the kids' schools, and she had those sent off to be tested for glyphosate. And she found glyphosate contamination in over 90% of those food samples from the school lunches. She did another one with fast food restaurants, and she found 100% of the samples were contaminated with glyphosate. So it's all over the food supply.
Not the McRib though, Stephanie, right? Don't tell me that. I mean, that you ruined my childhood if you tell me the McRib is destroyed by glyphosate.
McRib? What is that?
McRib. That was the McDonald's rib sandwich that they.
McRib. I hope not.
Well, and nobody did anything about any of this.
Yeah, the government is very nonchalant about it, and they know it's all over the food supply, but they don't even bother to test. The government has done very little testing. They admit that it's there, and they think it doesn't matter because it's safe.
I'm still trying to get my the idea that it goes from a weed killer to making its way into the food supply, and yet all those steps that have been taken in between, and nobody ever intervened to say, hey, this is not a good idea.
I'm surprised that the government hasn't, especially because you see the autism rates going up so dramatically. That was the thing that caught my attention back in the early 2000s, when I was looking at the rates. Every year there's more autism, and the government says, oh, we're just diagnosing it more, don't worry about it. And I just felt there's got to be something going on here. And then calling it a genetic disease, and then doing all these studies on genetics and not looking at anything in the environment. It's clearly something in the environment that's causing the rise in autism. And I was determined to figure out what it was. And I looked for 5 years. I looked hard at the vaccines, and I think the vaccines are a contributing factor, but I don't think they're number one. I think glyphosate is number one, the most serious offender with regard to the autism epidemic.
Well, and that was going to be my next question, because I remember, as a kid born in 1978, not to my knowledge, I do not remember having any peers, elementary school, middle school, high school, that had autism. And
Right.
It just shows you how sick people are, because people will push back. They'll say, well, they were classifying it differently. But you've heard that,
Yeah.
right?
I know it's not possible. When you think of 25% of the kids with autism can't talk, you're going to notice it if a child can't talk, right? They're mute.
I never noticed that either.
Yeah, there were no autism. I didn't know the word autism as a child. Of course, I'm older than you are, but we didn't have any of it, and we didn't have obesity either. All the kids were skinny.
That's a whole nother, that's a whole nother conversation to have with you while we're talking today. But so when did you start to, first of all, when did you take interest in glyphosate that led you to start looking at autism more?
Yeah, well, I started in 2007 looking at autism, and I looked at a number of different things, and I figured out that autism had a problem with the gut. I mean, a lot of the autistic kids have a lot of gut issues. So I was thinking in terms of something in the food supply or something in the water, looking for a toxic exposure through that. And it happened to be, and so I had looked for 5 years by 2012, and that was when I happened to be at a conference where Professor Don Huber gave a 2-hour presentation on glyphosate. And I walked into the room not knowing what glyphosate was, and I walked out believing that I had found the answer. It was that dramatic, because he was pointing out the things that glyphosate does to the gut, to the liver, and they matched very well with my understanding of the problems that autistic kids have. It matched so well that I felt that's got to be it. And then I went back and read everything I could about glyphosate, and that the rest is history. And I now have my book, Toxic Legacy, how the weed killer glyphosate is destroying our health and the environment. And that's a consequence of a 10-year effort before I wrote the book, for close to 10 years.
In your research, did you find that kids that were born with it to be autistic because of maybe bad decisions that the parents made in their lifestyle and their consumption of glyphosate?
Some of the kids are born with it. They develop it in utero because of the mother's exposure, and probably mother's exposure to glyphosate in particular. It disrupts the development of the embryo. But other kids regress into autism after they're born. And so that could be because of the vaccines. Now, I know that both Zen Honeycutt and Anthony Samsel, who's an independent toxicologist, both of them tested vaccines, childhood vaccines for glyphosate. And both of them, they found a consistent story between their two sets of samples that the live virus vaccines all contained glyphosate, whereas the ones that were not live virus, that were just like antigen and had some aluminum in them, they didn't have glyphosate. So the glyphosate was specifically in the live virus vaccines. And that includes MMR, which had the highest levels of glyphosate by far compared to all the other vaccines that they measured. So I am suspecting that MMR has been linked to autism through the controversial study of, Andrew Wakefield's, about Andrew Wakefield's paper that got retracted and he lost his license to practice medicine in the UK. Big story around Andrew Wakefield because he suggested that the MMR vaccine might be causing a problem with these kids that got the vaccination. And I think that it's possible that the glyphosate in the MMR vaccine is a major factor in making that vaccine very toxic.
What is the justification for putting glyphosate in the
They
MMR?
don't intentionally put it in. It's there because they're feeding the live virus nutrients that are derived from foods that are exposed to glyphosate, just like we're getting the foods. The virus gets the foods too that have the glyphosate in them, and then the virus picks up the glyphosate and it goes into the vaccine.
I'm not familiar with Andrew Wakefield.
You don't know that story?
No,
huh?
I don't.
You're not big on the anti-vaxxer community because it's all over there. Yeah, Andrew Wakefield, and there was a movie, Vaxxed, that was made. And Andrew Wakefield has been active in this space ever since. He's now probably not my age, but he's getting up there in age. He was a young doctor in the 1990s in UK when he did this study. There was a mother of an autistic child who came to him and said, "I think the vaccine caused my child's autism." And he did a study on several kids that had gotten injured by the vaccine, or it looked like they'd gotten injured by the vaccine. They developed a stomach problem, a gut problem, that then he argued it sent toxic metabolites from the pathogens to the brain. And that all of this happened in response to the vaccine. And his paper stayed on for quite a while, but it was eventually retracted. The industry got worried that it was going to, mess things up with regard to the vaccines. And so they pushed hard against it, and they managed to get his paper retracted. And then they got his medical license withdrawn, and he had to leave the UK. So he came to the US, I think hung out in Texas, maybe he's still, I'm not sure where he is now, but he came to America at that point and continued to canvass about the idea around vaccines and autism. So he's a big name in that space.
So he was speaking out about this stuff about, big pharma, and before it was fashionable, before all you guys started speaking out.
Right, exactly. He really was a pioneer and important work, but he has really paid a price. And they still just lay into him. I mean, even today, you'll see the mainstream say, basically, Andrew Wakefield, that despicable character who got his, paper retracted. They depict him, the mainstream depicts him as in an awful light, whereas the anti-vaxxers adore him. He's really a controversial figure.
Well, you think it was easier back then when the masses or the mob were attempting to cancel, easier then than it is today, because we have our phone, social media, the ability to transmit information a lot quickly versus back then?
What was easier back then?
Do you think it was easier to cancel, like destroy somebody like him, like back in the 90s versus what you and your
Maybe.
colleagues have gone through in the last 3 or 4 years since
Yeah, I
COVID.
mean the alternative community has learned how to fight back, and we have this whole alternative media space where things are happening. And I think it's with the social media, it's become a lot harder for the government to control the messaging, I think, and so word is getting out.
Well, the other thing is too, right? What is it? The process is worse than the punishment. So when they go after somebody like him, as they've gone again after other doctors, they just drag you through and financially just try to break you and bankrupt you, and that you don't have the means to fight back.
Right, they pick a target and then make it very public, and then they make everybody else terrified to step out of line. It works very well, right? Because then if you've got a lot to lose, you're afraid, you suddenly clam up. This is happening now too. I think it's been happening for a long time, where they showcase someone and make it very public, and terrify everybody because of what happened to that person. Set an example.
Do you think there's an Overton window right now in all this?
There's a what kind of window?
Overton window where it's being talked about more. The cancel culture has taken their foot off the gas in terms of glyphosate, autism,
Well,
vaccines.
there's certainly, I think there's a lot more publicity around it in the mainstream now because of RFK Jr. I think it's a very important step that RFK Jr. is in charge of HHS now. I think that's huge. I have a lot of hope that that's going to wake people up, both with respect to the food supply, which really needs to be fixed, and the vaccines. I think the vaccine industry has been allowed to go wild, I think, since 1986 when they passed that law that gave them a reprieve. So they can't be sued no matter what happens to a child, no matter how badly they're harmed by a vaccine. The industry is off the hook. They can't be sued, which is a huge development that happened in 1986. And since then, they've rolled out a huge number of vaccines. So the kids today get so many more vaccines compared to when I was a child. I got almost none, and even my kids didn't get that many. But after 1986, they just started rolling out vaccines left and right, and it's gotten completely out of hand. And it's a big boon for the industry, because if a child gets a vaccine and dies 2 hours later, they don't have any consequences to that. It's not their problem because of that law that was passed in 1986.
And how was that law able to slip through?
How did it happen?
Yeah, how did it slip
I
through
mean, it
there?
had to do with the vaccine that was causing injuries, and they were worried about the vaccine industry deciding not to even make that vaccine anymore because it was too risky. And the government felt that it would be really awful if you couldn't get these vaccines into these kids, and we start getting these horrible diseases coming back. So the governments felt pressured to do something to allow the vaccine to continue to be made, because the industry was going to stop making the vaccine because they were getting too many lawsuits. And the same thing's happening, by the way, with glyphosate right now. It's really scary because, there've been a lot of lawsuits against glyphosate on non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You know about that?
No, please share.
Yeah. So glyphosate, so there was, California passed a law that said glyphosate was a probable carcinogen some time ago. And that was a big breakthrough, because then that meant that people could claim that it could cause you cancer. And there was evidence from research that glyphosate was causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in people who were exposed to it. And so the first lawsuit was Dwayne Lee Johnson in California. He was a groundskeeper for schools, public schools, I believe, and he would use glyphosate. It was the only chemical he used to control the weeds in the schoolyards. And he was in his 40s when he developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he sued the Monsanto, well, Bayer at that point. Bayer had recently bought Monsanto, so he sued Bayer, claiming that glyphosate caused his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he won that lawsuit with a big settlement. And that was an eye opener for all kinds of other people who then started thinking, oh, I've got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and I used glyphosate, I'll do that too. So there are a huge number of lawsuits pending right now. It really opened up a can of worms. And Bayer is claiming that they're getting so many lawsuits for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that they won't be able to continue to sell glyphosate. In fact, they had decided, and I don't know if they've done it, I think they may have done it already. They had said, I read a couple of years back that they were going to get rid of glyphosate for the residential use in the United States, starting, I believe, at the beginning of 2024. I haven't confirmed that they've done that, but I think they no longer sell Roundup formulation with glyphosate to the residential community in the United States. That was their intent, but they were still selling it to the farmers because the farmers have a harder time making a case in a lawsuit because they use so many other chemicals that you can always point your finger at something else and say, my glyphosate didn't cause your problem. It was caused by that other chemical. So it's hard for a farmer to succeed in a lawsuit for any of these chemicals because of that. But lately there have been so many lawsuits on non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that Bayer is claiming that they will no longer be able to sell Roundup because it's too costly for them with all these lawsuits. And therefore they're going state by state to several different states, like half the states. They've been approaching them with legislation. They've been prepare legal documents that can become bills that can be considered for law in the state to say that basically to give the glyphosate the same kind of privilege that the vaccines have, that if you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and you think glyphosate caused it, too bad for you. You can't sue. They want to pass a law that says that state by state, and they want to get it at the federal government as well, but they're working on individual states. And it's really scary if these laws start getting passed, God help us all.
To your knowledge, has any states passed it?
I think it might be South Carolina that's getting very close. I think one of the states is getting very close to passing it, and people are fighting it. My friends are fighting it.
What kind of money are they? What kind of money do you wonder if they're throwing at these people in order to move this thing through?
I know that's the thing. The industry has a fantastic lobbying industry, and they prepare. I mean, they write the bill for you. They say, "Here's the bill we want you to pass." They'll write it for you, and then they'll canvass with the legislators to try to get them to consider that bill. It's a very dangerous situation right now because I really worry if glyphosate gets to the point where it's you have no recourse if you get sick from it. That's going to be very dangerous.
How likely do you think it'll start to states will start to implement?
I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of pressure going on, and then there are people who are fighting it as hard as they can. So I appreciate people like Zen Honeycutt who are pushing back against that at the state level.
I have to tell you, this is the first I've ever heard of this. I guarantee you a lot of people are not aware.
Well, I'm glad I'm bringing it to your attention. You should look it up. It's a very serious problem.
So basically, glyphosate would be on the child vaccine schedule in terms of exemption.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would be a similar process that if you get sick and you're using glyphosate to control the weeds in your yard and you get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, then you can't sue the company. You can't claim that glyphosate caused that. That would be the law that would say that. And the reason is because it's essential. It's essential for our food supply, would be the argument. We can't afford not to use it. We can't afford not to poison ourselves.
It's essential for our food supply. Because of all the soybeans, right? I mean, is that...
Well, there's a belief that, and Monsanto promotes that belief that glyphosate is essential for us to produce enough food to feed our population. That if we didn't have glyphosate, it would be our food supply would be less. We would have less food. Basically, we couldn't grow as much food if we didn't have glyphosate. That's what they argue. It's not true, but that's what they argue. We would have to put more resources into farming. Maybe we have to start putting people out there pulling weeds. I mean, I think we can develop technology. In fact, this is happening with sort of robotic tractors that even they can be solar powered. They can have vision. They basically have smarts. It's like a robotic tractor that can recognize, knows what weeds look like, and then can just hit them with a laser or with boiling water. There's ways you could kill the weeds. Have the robot go out and do basically what humans used to do, which is to pull the weeds by hand, kill the weeds by hand, one by one, in some careful way that would not be toxic. I think it's conceivable that we can come up with technology that could keep us from having to put lots of people out on the farm to pull the weeds.
And then we could all go back to eating our bread and drinking our beer again and not have to worry.
I know, it would be so nice.
So then how does glyphosate attribute to the obesity problem? And are they running parallel with each other with the increase in glyphosate? Is that and autism? Does that increase did the obesity rate increase at the same speed?
Yes, everything's going up. If fatty liver disease, inflammatory bowel disease, obesity, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, they're all going up over time. And the rise is very well matched with the rise in glyphosate usage on core crops. There's stunning correlations. That's something that I spent many years together with Nancy Swanson, and we've published a number of papers where we show these incredible plots of perfect correlation between all these diseases. And you look at obesity, you can see around the world, when a country starts to adopt a Western diet, they start getting fat. It's pretty much certain. It's the Western food that's causing them to get fat. And partly it's that the processed foods are not very nutritious. You don't eat enough fiber, for example. When you live on a processed food diet, well, you've got all these chemicals in your food, because you can look at the list of ingredients in the soy protein bar and you won't want to eat it if you look at the list of ingredients. These are sort of synthetic foods, and they're not good for you. They're missing critical vitamins and minerals. And so they have deficiencies in critical nutrients, but they also have toxic chemicals. And glyphosate, I think, is the most important one in the food supply. They've got insecticides and herbicides and fungicides. All of those are in the food supply. So we're being poisoned by our food, and we're not getting enough nutrition. Micronutrients are deficient. And the combination of those two messes up the gut microbiome.
I was reading something. Oh no, it was jelly beans. I was at a grocery store. I don't know if I told you. So I'm 5'5", and I used to weigh 280 pounds.
Oh wow!
And back 15, 16 years ago, and now I'm around 152, 151ish, somewhere in there.
That's a huge amount of weight to lose. I'm impressed.
Yeah, no diets, no pharmaceuticals, no.
Wow! How'd you do it? Ketogenic diet?
Yeah, now I do more of a carnivore, but ketogenic, and actually it was a person I had on here, Ahmad Malik, if you know him out of the UK.
I've heard of his name, yeah.
He called me out. We were recording almost 2 years ago to the day, where he said to me, he was like, "What'd you eat today?" My weight had gone up and down, but I was back up to close to 200 pounds, and he started grilling me, like, "What'd you eat today?" I'm like, apple peanut butter. I'm about to go meet friends for brunch, or I'm going to have beer and whatever. And he goes, "You cannot have a stance against vaccines and eat processed junk. You can't do it." Forever changed me after that.
Yeah, that's good.
But, I was once in a while I'm in the store and I'll just look at stuff that, I had eaten at one point in my life, and I look at look what the ingredients are. And the jelly beans, for example, I don't remember the name of it, but there was an ingredient in the jelly bean that was used to wax a car. Like the same shine on the jelly beans, because they're very shiny.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, this is something you probably don't want to eat. Right.
Yes. Well, the food dyes have gotten a lot of attention lately because the government is finally going to try to get rid of some of those synthetic food dyes. Which the United States was happy to have, whereas the European countries had all banned those food dyes. So did you see the show with the chicks and the pretty colored chicks from the U.S. and then the drab colors for the Canada and Europe? Because we're happy to have these food dyes that are toxic, in our food.
But to me,
ractopamine is another one. Ractopamine we allow our animals to eat. We give them ractopamine, which is a drug that causes them to have more muscle and less fat. It actually affects their musculature. And U.S. is happy to use that. And many countries around the world have banned ractopamine.
Ractopamine, you said?
Ractopamine. RAC, ractopamine. Yeah, it's a drug that they give to the cows in order to beef up their meat.
And the beef that you buy at the store, would you have any way of knowing if they were fed ractopamine?
They probably were if it's here. If it's coming from the U.S., they probably were. That would be my guess, but I don't know. I think it's pretty extensively used here.
Would it expand as far as to chickens and pigs then as well?
I don't think the chickens, but I'm not sure. Certainly the cows, and I believe the pigs. Yeah.
So this is it's beefing up, no pun intended. Bulking.
It's beefing up the beef, yeah. It's making them more muscular and have less fat.
So then in return, you'll get you'll get more beef out of it then. Is that
Exactly. Yeah. They figure they want the muscle in order to be able to sell the steaks,
I've never heard of that ractopamine before. So when was that brought into the
I
picture?
don't know how long that's been around. I just know that the US is most of the countries, I think, ban that, just like the food dyes. US is just we're way too casual about these toxic exposures. We just somehow think it's fine. And you look at our health and you can see the effects because we do miserably as far as infant mortality and life expectancy, all these numbers. We are way at the bottom of the of all the developed countries in terms of our statistics. We do really badly. And of course, we have very high levels of obesity and diabetes and kidney problems. I mean, we just have a lot of health issues in this country. And of course, neurological problems, lots and lots of depression and ADHD, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease. We're in trouble in this country. And I think that it's great that this new administration, I actually think that our health crisis may be the thing that actually allowed Trump to win in this election, because when he brought on RFK Jr., there were a lot of people like me who were so thrilled to see that RFK Jr. might have a chance at getting a political appointment and having power, that all of a sudden people were willing to overlook some of Trump's flaws because of that, because he had brought on RFK Jr.
But don't you think that Big Pharma, I mean, they're such a powerful entity. Basically, I like to refer to them, as others do as well, as a cartel. They're not going to go away.
No, I know they're going to fight hard. I'm sure they're very anxious about what's going to happen in the future, given what's happening right now. But they're certainly going to try their best to find a way to get through this and keep what they've got, because they have so much power and so much money, and they don't want that to go away.
Why do you think our society doesn't take, and maybe this is just me, so I have conversations with people that, and I was one of them, like I just explained to you where I was with my health. I mean, I'm really good at eating. Some people are good at crocheting and quilting. I'm very good at eating. But yet I will meet somebody, or I have friends that are like, they might be on a statin, or they're pre-diabetic. They're in their 40s, and yet I see where they're going, whether it be Disneyland or sporting events, and the options at all those places is just straight garbage.
Yes.
But they don't take their health seriously. Like, when did that become a thing?
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to just eat, and it would have been the case 100 years ago because food was healthy. But now you have to be very concerned about the food supply because it's not healthy anymore. And you have to really go out of your way to avoid. And of course, I always buy certified organic when I shop. It's more expensive, but it's definitely worth the extra money. And that's a big step you can take, is just to buy certified organic, especially for the foods that are going to be high in glyphosate.
But the people that I'm referencing here is some of this stuff, they know it's bad for them, but they do it anyway. Like,
I know.
If I was on a prescription, or if a doctor told me I was like pre-diabetic, that would terrify me to the point where I would just clean it all up.
Yeah, I mean, some people are just less disciplined than others, I guess, and they maybe just kind of have a cavalier attitude that I just, enjoy life and hope that it won't matter. Sort of have a naive impression that maybe it won't affect me the way it affects others. Maybe I'll be okay and just go ahead and enjoy life. They're maybe pleasure seeking too much and not having enough discipline to not do the things that are bad for them, or to maybe deny that they're bad for them and not recognize that it's true. And some things are not true. You get a lot of confusion about what's true and what's not true. When you try to figure out what to eat, there are all these different diet fads that are contradictory. So you get really quite confused about what's the right path to take.
I remember somebody said to me, they're like, "Carnivore, aren't you worried about your heart?" And I said, "Well, the cavemen did it a couple hundred years ago. There's a guy at X that I follow. His name is Samahul. He lives in Wales or somewhere in Europe. And I love what he said. He's like, the cavemen did it a couple hundred years ago. I mean, I'd be more worried about my heart if I was vaccinated and I drank all the time and I'm eating out all the time."
Right. Yes. Well, everyone has differences of opinion, and people think that they should avoid cholesterol for their heart, and that is not true at all. I did a deep dive into the statin drugs, and I think they're really toxic. I don't think anybody should be on a statin drug. And this whole concept of high cholesterol, linking it to heart disease is flawed. I think the problem there is actually an issue with sulfation, impaired sulfation, which keeps cholesterol from being able to be solubilized, because cholesterol gets sulfated and then it gets shipped around freely in the blood. But if you can't sulfate the cholesterol, then it's not water soluble, and now you have to stuff it inside a lipid particle. So you get these high LDL particles. The liver has to sort of release LDL with cholesterol hiding inside it, because it cannot put enough cholesterol, can't make enough cholesterol sulfate. So my personal belief is that it's a cholesterol sulfate deficiency problem rather than a cholesterol excess problem. And I think eating a high cholesterol diet is actually good for your heart.
So, large amounts of meat, proteins.
Right. Yes. I mean, animal-based foods have cholesterol, but meat certainly has cholesterol. Animal-based fats, especially, and they're healthy. I think they're healthy fats.
Butter.
I think lard and butter are the healthiest fats.
I love butter. Butter has become my go-to. I mean, I literally
I do too.
Do you?
Yeah, I think butter is fantastic. Actually, we haven't talked about deuterium, but I can bring that up now because butter is a great low deuterium nutrient. Butter is low in deuterium, and that is a really good thing. And so are fats. Animal-based fats are low in deuterium. And I suspect that one of the reasons why fats are healthy for you is because they're low in deuterium.
What is it? Explain deuterium.
Yeah, deuterium is heavy hydrogen, so it's a natural atom. And it's an isoform of hydrogen. Hydrogen is the smallest atom. It has one proton and one electron. And deuterium has an extra neutron, so it makes it twice as heavy as hydrogen. It's natural. It's found in nature at 155 parts per million compared to hydrogen. So that sounds small, but because there's so much hydrogen in your body, you actually have a lot of deuterium. And deuterium wrecks the ATPase pumps in the mitochondria that make the energy. They make the ATP for the cell, which is the energy currency. So the pumps that make the energy, it's like putting sugar in the gas tank. If you put deuterium into the pump, they don't like it. And so the whole metabolic system has figured out how to keep deuterium levels really low inside the mitochondria. And that is a really important thing to do to keep the mitochondria healthy. And unhealthy mitochondria are a basis of many, many diseases that are problematic these days. All these chronic diseases are associated with mitochondrial dysfunction, they call it. And that's because the mitochondria have too much deuterium. That's what I think. And then you could get into exactly how glyphosate messes up that whole system, which causes those mitochondria to become overloaded with deuterium, which then causes you to get sick. I think that's foundational. And I've done a lot of writing and also interviews around that topic. So if people are interested in knowing more, they can go watch some of my other interviews where I talk about that at length.
With deuterium, is there any foods to stay away from that are high in deuterium?
Sugars tend to be high, sugars and starch, and fats tend to be low, and then proteins are somewhere in the middle. So certainly more towards proteins, and high fat diet is healthier with respect to deuterium. You'll get lower deuterium levels if you do that in your diet. But it's not just a matter of having low deuterium. It's also a matter of having healthy enzymes that are able to control the deuterium and where it goes. And that's where glyphosate comes in, because glyphosate messes up many of the enzymes that are involved in keeping the deuterium levels low in the mitochondria.
With the refined sugar, when you say sugars, would that be both refined and natural? Same.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe, yeah, probably so. Sugars in general are higher in deuterium than fats. And then, as I said, proteins are somewhere in the middle, as a general rule. But coconut oil, butter, ghee, lard, those are all really good. They're about as low as you can find in deuterium among all the foods. Animal-based fats, but also coconut oil.
So for yourself, when you eat butter, is there a specific, like I buy the organic 365 brand at Whole Foods. Is there a difference?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I buy organic too. We don't have a Whole Foods here, so I don't buy Whole Foods, but I do buy organic butter.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was a difference between the organic and just the standard butter.
There is. The organic has lower deuterium. I mean, there's other differences as well, but it has lower deuterium.
Wow. I mean, I don't even want to tell you how much. I mean, I eat like a stick of butter a day between the meat I
That's
have and
amazing. That's really interesting, isn't it? It's a good thing when people think eating fat is going to make you fat. And here you are, exact opposite, right?
and it's good. Like I just will cut a slice and just have it with my coffee.
Yeah. I love butter too. I always put tons of it in my potatoes. It's a super healthy food. It's really good for you. And especially, of course, organic butter. You can't go wrong with that.
With the in people will literally push back to like your cholesterol, your cholesterol. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not worried about that. And
Yeah.
that's what the last 5 years has showed me. It's like everything is a lie.
I know. That's why you don't know what to do, right? And that's why people can just go ahead and just eat stuff that's bad for them because is it really bad for them? They don't know. I mean, because if you start not believing anything you hear, then you can just kind of say, well, hell, I'm just going to eat whatever I want, right? You can get to a point where you just think, I don't know what to believe. And therefore, I'm just going to enjoy myself. I could see that kind of logic to say, I don't believe these people when they say this is bad for me. And since it's so confusing as far as what's bad, what's good, it's really hard to get the right answer.
What are your thoughts on the whole Ozempic movement?
Oh, Ozempic's a good one. I'm very interested in Ozempic. I think it's really bad. But again, it caused me to do research. Once I was aware of Ozempic, I got really interested in what was going on there. And it's a GLP-1 is the enzyme that if the stomach is supposed to release this GLP-1 enzyme, which will suppress appetite. But for some reason, it's not doing it. So that's the big problem is that you're not producing enough GLP-1. So then you take it as a supplement, and then it will cause you to lose your appetite. And so the question is, why isn't it making enough? And it's actually very, very interesting because I started looking into the gut microbes, and there's a microbe called Akkermansia, which is a very interesting microbe in the gut that actually its only food is the sulfomucins that are produced by the colonocytes. So the colon makes these sulfomucins which line the gut, and they're these complex sugar molecules. And then the Akkermansia eat those and break them down into simple molecules. And then there are other microbes that turn those simple molecules into short-chain fatty acids. And it's the short-chain fatty acids, especially butyrate, that are super, super, they're like God's food for the colonocytes. They love butyrate. And so these short-chain fatty acids that are produced by the microbes are really important to keep the gut healthy. But those microbes get hurt by glyphosate. And so what happens is that when you are getting glyphosate exposure, the microbes that make the short-chain fatty acids are not working. They're not producing enough. And so the colon doesn't get a healthy diet. And then the colon gets sick, and then the whole system breaks down. And so, but Akkermansia work together with these other microbes to make these short-chain fatty acids. And Akkermansia actually produces a metabolite that triggers the release of GLP-1 by these cells that are that have that job. And so if you have healthy Akkermansia, then you get the GLP-1 naturally, and then you don't need to take the GLP-1 analog, which is what's in those Ozempic drugs. Do you see what I'm saying? You have a natural version of that molecule that would normally be released, and you have this bug, Akkermansia, that can trigger the release of that molecule. But if Akkermansia is not present, then that trigger doesn't happen, and then you don't get that molecule naturally. So now you take it as a synthetic alternative, which then makes your body pretend that it has Akkermansia when it actually doesn't, which is not good because now you're behaving in a way that is opposing what you need to be healthy because of this disbalance that you have in your gut. So it's all about making the gut microbiome healthy by making sure that you have the right amounts of all these different microbes that do these different things for you. You need to be in balance and have less pathogens and more beneficial bacteria in your gut in order to be healthy. And when you don't have that balance, that can trigger you getting fat. But the fat is actually, there's a reason for the fat that has to do with protecting yourself. So, so it's all very complicated interactions that go on in the gut between the microbes and the host cells to keep everything healthy. And glyphosate messes all that up. So, and that's what triggers the obesity because then you don't have enough Akkermansia, you don't have enough GLP-1, and then your appetite becomes too strong.
Well, and in Ozempic, the original intention was it was obviously an appetite suppressor, but was it for What was it to treat?
Diabetes.
Yeah.
It was originally for diabetes. It was approved to treat diabetes.
How
And
long
then they
ago?
discovered.
Not to interrupt you. How
I
long?
don't know how long ago. It's been a while, though, I think. It hasn't been decades. It's maybe just less than 10 years. I'm not sure, actually.
Okay, so give or take less than 10 years, and then they figured out a way to put it into every med spa in the country because there's so many people that are taking this for
It's
weight
amazing
loss.
how quickly people took it on, and everyone's, I'm amazed that people don't think there's going to be an issue. I've heard it's had some really horrible effects, sometimes paralyzing the gut, for example, and causing really serious, irreversible problems with your gut. So I think you have to be very careful with something like that.
What is when your gut is paralyzed? What does that mean?
Well, you can't push the feces through, so you're just going to get tremendous constipation, for example, and then you'll get SIBO, a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because things are not moving. It's very slow movement of the gut. Things stick around for a very long time, and they can fester, and you can get inflammation and pathogen overgrowth and all kinds of problems.
Is
Constipation.
is that something where it could unfreeze if stopping using Ozempic, for example, or does it?
Well, apparently some of these effects didn't go away after they stopped, which is really scary,
And
like permanent damage.
it feels like this Ozempic explosion occurred over the last. Well, it was after COVID, I think, right? Maybe those.
Very recently, yeah, just the last couple of years.
So we don't know what the long-term damage or long-term effects is going to be from this.
We don't, and I'm very interested to see how that all unfolds because I suspect we're going to see there's a very big downside to it. It's not just harmless. It's going to be affecting people's health, and some people are going to get really, really badly harmed by it. What percentage? I mean, it's always a matter of trading this and that, right? Because being extremely obese is not healthy. You'd much rather fix the problem naturally, and I believe you could fix the problem by fixing your diet. Like you did.
People though it becomes in their eyes it becomes more painful to change to change their
Yeah, they want to
lifestyle.
have a pill that'll take care of it. And Ozempic is really dangerous also because even aside from damaging your stomach, if you take it, as you take it, you lose weight, and if you stop taking it, you gain that weight back. It's been very clear that when what you gain back is more fat, what you lose is more muscle, so you become sort of more less good tone in your body. You've got more fat, less muscle. By the time you go through the cycle of taking the drug, losing the weight, going off the drug, gaining the weight back, and now you're back to the same weight you were, only you've got more fat. So in the end, it's not a good thing. And it's a perfect drug because you have to take it for life, right? As soon as you stop taking it, you gain weight and your appetite becomes ferocious.
Yeah, and I was reading something where it does something to your eyes, makes your eyes more.
Right. There's been some concerns about it causing blindness, I believe.
It doesn't make your eyes look more crazy though, or something like it.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's causing damage to the eyes. It's a very, we really don't know. It's a giant experiment that we're doing. It's amazing to me how something comes out like that, and then so many people just grab onto it because they're so desperate. They just grab onto it, and they all are on board. And like the COVID vaccine as well, right? So many people got that vaccine, and we're seeing the repercussions now. I think there's a tremendous amount of damage as a consequence of the COVID vaccines that we're going to eventually become aware of. The mainstream is going to become aware of it in time.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on that. One last thing I want to say about Ozempic, and then I want to go to those vaccines for a minute. You okay on time for a few more minutes?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Uh, my concern with Ozempic is too because you don't like to assume anything, but I'm going to go on a limb here and make an assumption. You have people that are taking it that have children that are seeing this as an example. I'm going to go on a limb and say I bet you some of these kids are taking it as well.
Oh my, interesting.
I mean, would it surprise
That's
you?
really scary.
Would it surprise
Yeah,
you if you to hear?
I know. I can think if a parent has an obese child and is thinking, well, why don't I just give some to the child, right? Oh, that's scary. That's really scary. Same thing with statin drugs. I was shocked to find that they were giving statin drugs to 11-year-olds. That's so bad to have to mess up your cholesterol when you haven't even gone through puberty yet.
Why would an 11-year-old need a statin, Stephanie? Because their
Well,
cholesterol.
high cholesterol. Yeah, it's crazy.
So, with the COVID vaccines, are you seeing anything in your research where cancers are popping up from this?
Oh yeah, I think turbo cancer is definitely a factor, a causal relationship with turbo cancer for sure. I've even written about that. I've written papers. We had a case study. It was amazing. Very, very aggressive cancer that killed the patient within a year, right after the vaccine. And it started with Bell's palsy, right? The vaccine caused Bell's palsy, and then it eventually became a aggressive cancer. I think it definitely does cause turbo cancer.
What is turbo cancer? Is it any type of cancer?
It's sort of a term that was invented, I think, from the vaccine. It just means that it really accelerates. The thought is that if you already have cancerous tissue sort of in your body, and you may not be aware of it, but then if you get the vaccine, then that cancer goes on fire. Like all of a sudden, that cancer becomes energized to grow faster. So turbo cancer just meaning that it develops much more quickly than it would have without the vaccine. The vaccine accelerates the rate at which the cancer gets bigger, metastasizes, all the bad stuff.
There was a girl that I was following on social media, and she's an elite runner that was living up in Flagstaff, and she was very adamant about vaccines. She did a partnership with CVS. She had like a really big following, so she had a partnership with CVS where she would, went in there. I don't know if they showed videoed her actually getting it, but it was apparent that she was getting all these shots. And then she just disappeared and would come on and say like her running, she's dealing with an injury. They can't figure it out. She thought it was autoimmune. And then she leads her to reveal she has been diagnosed with Crohn's.
Yeah, wow.
I don't know if that Crohn's would be something that would come from that.
Yeah, it's possible. I haven't specifically looked at Crohn's, but I think it's possible. It's amazing how many things. I have looked a lot at the vaccine database. It's a gold mine to look at all the different conditions that are associated with the COVID vaccines. It's unbelievable. A lot of blood problems, with blood clots and things like that, and also neurological problems. And what's it called? I forgot the word. But lots and lots of problems with the nerves and problems with the blood associated with those vaccines. And then, of course, the cancer growth. Immune system gets messed up. And I've written about that too. The vaccines disturb the immune system such that your balance of immune cells is inappropriate. And you get, you have too many Treg cells, which are, the vaccine actually causes your immune system. If you keep getting boosters, you get to the point where your immune system is taught to stand down, so that it actually doesn't, it actually works opposite of what you would expect. Instead of giving you antibodies that protect you from the virus, you get antibodies that actually, you get antibodies that keep the antibodies from protecting you, so to speak. It's something called IgG4. It's a very interesting science, but those antibodies go up dramatically after the booster shots. And those IgG4 antibodies, not only do they not work as antibodies, but they get in the way of the antibodies that are supposed to do the job. So they make it worse than having no antibodies after repeated boosters. So that's why when people get lots of boosters, they start to get COVID again. Their protection has gone negative.
Do you think we're through the worst of it in terms of the injuries and the deaths? Or...
I don't, because I think there's long-term effects that don't show up until years later. I predict it's going to cause an increase in neurodegenerative disease, like Alzheimer's in the future, and Parkinson's disease.
Which wouldn't be discovered if you were a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old that received these shots. Right. You wouldn't learn about that until...
Yeah, you'd get your Alzheimer's when you're 45 instead of getting it when you're 70, for example. It just is going to, again, accelerate because messing up the immune system is really, really bad. The immune system is so important for your health. And it's going to be very hard for it to recover from the damage that was done from those vaccines, especially if you've had several boosters. I think it's going to be very hard to restore your health.
What about from a standpoint for the young people that did it, the miscarriages and men not being sterile?
Absolutely. That's another thing that we're seeing. We're seeing fewer babies being born to people who were vaccinated. I think there was a study that just came out that showed that that the COVID vaccine was affecting the birth rate, decreasing the birth rate.
So what, as we wrap up here, what is your primary focus now, and then in the short-term future?
I'm having a lot of fun doing research on deuterium. It's so interesting, and the whole metabolic processes that go on with respect to managing deuterium in the body. It's kind of like aluminum, and mercury. There's all these kind of toxic things that your body deals with, but deuterium is a very important one that is natural. And so everyone has to cope with deuterium, but our bodies have learned how to manage it well, except that things like glyphosate are messing it up. And so it's really interesting to look at something like cancer through a new lens on the from looking at deuterium and the role that deuterium plays in cancer, and then to try to figure out the metabolic processes by which the cancer cell actually works to hoard deuterium. And I've written papers that have gotten published on this, that the cancer cell hoards deuterium in order to keep it away from the rest of the body, in order to protect the rest of the body from deuterium overload. So the cancer comes about as a protective mechanism that eventually gets you in trouble, once it's kind of gone too far. But it's a last-ditch effort on the part of the body to try to deal with the deuterium problem by creating a cancer that can help to clear the deuterium from the body. Really fascinating biology.
I'm always curious, people like yourself, when you sit down and you start doing your research, like, what is it? I mean, do you block out 2 or 3 hours, or do you wake up?
I love to get immersed. I do. Yeah, I get very annoyed if the phone rings or something. Like I just want to just be there with my science. It's wonderful. It's a gift, I think, to be able to get so absorbed in something like that. And biology is a fascinating puzzle. It's so interesting. I've really enjoyed trying to figure it out, and I still have a long ways to go, but I'm making progress, and I've got a great group of people that I work with, and we're all sort of struggling to figure things out. So it's a lot of fun.
Are you one of those people that gets up at 2 a.m, you can't sleep, or midnight, and you go into the office?
Well, I don't do that, but I do find that I can wake up with an idea, and I feel like my dreams somehow brought it to me, have a breakthrough idea in the morning. That's been true forever for me. Even when I was in school, way back when I had problem sets at MIT, and there'd be a problem set that I couldn't solve, and I'd finally just go to bed. And then in the morning I would be, oh yeah, of course. And then I would be able to solve it. So it's really quite cool that sleeping somehow sets things up to help you figure things out, I believe.
Could you step away from it for a week, or is it one of those things where even when you travel, your stuff is coming with you?
Yeah, it's with me all the time. I can get absorbed in a puzzle, like a Sudoku puzzle, and sort of lose myself in that and get a break. But that's about the only way I can do it.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated because people like yourself, you love what you do and you love your work. So I imagine you don't ever take a day off.
Right. I don't mind working. Work is play for me, which is really great. I'm very fortunate, actually, that I get funded to do this kind of work. It's very unusual, I think.
Where can people find you?
I have a webpage, stephanieseneff.net. I have my book, Toxic Legacy, which is available on Amazon and several different booksellers. I guess the best way to reach me, if you want to actually communicate with me, is through email, which is Seneff, Seneff, my last name, at CSAIL, CSAIL, Computer Science Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. That's my laboratory at MIT, .mit.edu, csail.mit.edu. Send me email, and I'll get back to you.
And then also your X handle?
I do have X, yes, and I have a lot of followers on X. So, and I guess that's probably just Stephanie Seneff. I don't know. I have an X handle.
Yeah, I want to be your 40. I'm saying this on the record now. I want to be your 41st follower. Can I be the 41st follower there, Stephanie?
Yeah, I'll do that for you.
Mercy follow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. You always make time for me, and I really appreciate that. And I look forward to continuing to follow your work and more conversations ahead.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, we have a lot in common. So stay healthy, and I can see you have a good lifestyle. So that's great.
Appreciate it. Mic drop.